We got Gators breakdown here. We know we're business.
Gators breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC, coming at you right here, Florida, Ole Miss, noon in the swamp, last home game of the season, senior day. Man, hard to believe. Only 2 more games, but this one being the last one in the swamp. I wish it wasn't a noon game for the last one, but here we are. So, college football playoff contender, Ole Miss, led by Lane Kiffin, coming into the swamp. Of course, storyline galore there. But to help me break it all down, special guest Zach Moreth from the Rebel Walk. He's going to break down this matchup with me. And look, of course, the Rebels, college football playoff hopes on the line. Can the Gators play spoiler in the swamp? So, we'll get into Ole Miss's impressive season so far. Also, kind of going back to that last win, their last game over Georgia, their playoff positioning here, the return to star receiver Trey Harris, his impact on this Rebel offense to go along with stellar quarterback Jackson Dart, of course. Florida's got some momentum. We'll talk about a little bit of upset potential a little bit here too. And of course, looking at their defense, Princely Umanmielen's return to Gainesville and his impact on the Ole Miss defense. So lots to get into right there with Zach. Of course, will it be Gator Bait? Will it be Hotty Toddy? My preview and prediction will be after catching up with Zach. And then the episode will conclude with another focus on the Gators with Alex Shepard as we get into some more Gator talk before we sign off here on this episode of Gators Breakdown. So, look, just an interesting game here. But the interesting part of it is all the pressure on Ole Miss. I mean, how did they react to that? They're not in this position, like your Georgias, your Alabamas, your Ohio States of the world, where they have multiple playoff appearances. This is rarefied air for Ole Miss and new pressure for them. So that's an interesting aspect of this one here as Ole Miss comes on the road. Why they got all this playoff potential weighing on their shoulders. So their 8-2 record goes like this: 76-0 win over Furman to start the season, 52-3 over Middle Tennessee, 40-6 over Wake Forest, 52-13 over Georgia Southern. And then they start conference play by losing 20-17 against Kentucky for their first loss of the season, bounce back with a big 27-3 win over a good South Carolina team. Followed that up with their second loss of the season. That one against LSU, 29-26 in overtime. Then the first of 3 straight wins, 26-14 over Oklahoma. And then a 63-31 victory against Arkansas. And then a big win over Georgia in their last game, 28-10. So while we can say Florida has wins over the 2 teams that they have lost to, they also dominated Georgia. And that's where Ole Miss is coming into this season. So before we get to the interview, download the Autograph app. If you're a fair weather fan, don't listen to this. But if you're a diehard, like I know you are, listening right here in Gators Breakdown, well, this app is for you. As diehard Gator fans, you can earn big rewards by tuning into your favorite content, even more from this show on the Autograph app. Every minute you spend keeping up with your favorite team earns you coins. Stack them up, cash them in for everything from signed jerseys to free tickets and more. There's a news feed to get you caught up on the day's news, a podcast feed so you can listen to Gators Breakdown and other shows right in the app. Download Autograph now on the Google Play or App Store using code Gators Breakdown. Link is in the description, because real fans deserve more. Here we are with Zach Moreth from the Rebel Walk as the Gators host the Ole Miss Rebels. Only 2 games left. The season's flying by. Zach, man, thanks for hopping on and previewing these Rebels.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to get into it, Dave. It's crazy that it's already November, but I'm excited for the matchup, man.
Yeah, probably a little more excitement on your guys' end with the playoff push coming too. So
right, I mean, you can't lose this one,
Yeah. Absolutely. Lots to get into here. And look, as we look at Ole Miss from the Gator side, of course, we'll get caught up in, it's hard to keep up with some other teams sometimes. So that's why I love bringing a guest on. And look, 2 losses earlier in the season for Ole Miss. Last game, the big win over Georgia to get firmly into the college football playoff race. And head coach Lane Kiffin now says Rebels are peaking at the right time. So I'll ask, what does peaking at the right time mean for this Ole Miss team?
Yeah, Dave, it's a good question. And I think it starts with, not only the win against Georgia, which was massive, because, if you lose that game, the season's essentially over after those two early losses. But also in terms of health, last week we had a bye week, and Lane Kiffin basically implied that Trey Harris, the SEC's yards leader for wide receivers, is supposed to come back this week, and possibly Logan Diggs as well, who's a running back who transferred from LSU, and he hasn't played a snap of football all year. And he's a type of running back that Ole Miss has really been looking for, right? We have our finesse guys, our speed guys, but on short yardage plays, we have to bring in a defensive tackle who's very athletic, but he comes in and he's the one who's converting those rushes because we don't have that powerhouse back. And it looks like that player in Logan Diggs may be returning. So just a good time for Ole Miss right now, it looks like. You're coming off the win against Georgia with all that momentum. But in addition to that, you have a lot of good things rolling in terms of health, and it starts with Trey Harris, absolutely.
Yeah, certainly. We'll get into that too as we kind of go, position by position a little bit. But back to the last game, how much was beating Georgia kind of validation for where the program is?
Yeah, it was everything. And as someone in the crowd, not only was winning that game special, but I thought the environment was really, really good for Ole Miss. It's a stadium. I believe capacity was around 68,000, the most ever at an Ole Miss game. But I'd never heard Vaught Hemingway that loud. And it just goes to show that people are really invested in this program and they want to come out and support Ole Miss in any way you can. And you see it in the transfer portal. We're flipping 5 stars from Alabama. You see it in recruiting. And of course, you see it in the gameplay. So I think it was crucial and allowed everyone to continue to believe that our coaches do know what they're doing, because there wasn't a sense of confidence after LSU and especially not after Kentucky. I mean, I can't even begin on how I felt walking out of the stadium after we lost to Kentucky. So it kind of revalidated everyone's feelings, and, the fan base is locked in and hopefully ready to get to the playoffs, Dave.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the Kentucky and the LSU games. That's the 2 losses Ole Miss suffered this year. And, hey, look, transitive property will get you in trouble in college football, but Florida blew out Kentucky. Florida beat LSU last week. So not saying, look, we know it's not that easy. Oh, Florida should go beat Ole Miss now. But it just lets you know, man, the SEC this year, it is unpredictable in a lot of ways.
It's crazy. And you look at all like these potential 2-loss teams. I'm having a hard time figuring out how the committee is supposed to decide who gets in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But, looking on Florida, definitely not a team to sleep on. I think if DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt in the Georgia game, you're looking at a much closer finish and maybe a potential upset there. For just based off the things that I've seen, Florida's a very physical team. If you look what they did against LSU, I believe you guys recorded 7 sacks. Mm-hmm. Ole Miss recorded 0, and the Ole Miss defensive line has the most sacks in the country. So it's definitely something to be concerned about. This isn't a game where you're walking into Gainesville like, oh, it's an easy blowout. This is going to be competitive. And I think this is one of the most, right now, it's obviously the most important game of the season because our last game's against Mississippi State. We're not going to talk about State. They're not good right now. But seriously, like, Florida can play. And this game being in the swamp, it's concerning. And it should definitely worry fans. I mean, I'm scared about it because if you lose again, you're out of the playoffs. So we'll see.
Zach, you brought up Mississippi State. You said you didn't want to talk about it, but from an outsider perspective, I want to get your view on this because, man, I'm going to tell you, I loved the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving night. What about you guys? Did you want to keep it there, or are you good with moving it to Friday or Saturday off of Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I was good with moving it, Dave, because the first thing with me is like, I'm also trying to watch NFL games, right? And then I don't want to travel to the game on Thanksgiving. So
good point.
Now that it's on Friday, like, I'm flying in Friday morning, I can still have Thanksgiving. So I like it a little better, and hopefully it gets more viewers too.
Yeah. But I enjoyed having my chocolate pie and leftover turkey eating, watching the Egg Bowl. So, hey, let's get into this team a little bit. Jackson Dart leads the country or the SEC in many categories, but mainly, if you would just take a look at the kind of the main points here: total offense, passing efficiency, yards per attempt, third in passing yards. What do you attribute to all of his success?
It sounds really strange to talk about, but we really saw Jackson Dart take a step forward when Trey Harris got injured.
Mm.
If you look at those games up until LSU, Trey Harris was getting a majority of the targets and a majority of the yards. I mentioned it earlier, but Trey hasn't played since October 12th, and he still has the most receiving yards in the SEC, which is just a crazy stat. But Trey comes out, and now we're starting to involve our second, third, and fourth wide receivers who have looked phenomenal. The tight ends in the red zone are becoming a crucial factor. And Jackson's also done a nice job using his legs. He's a very physical runner. He's always looking to extend plays. And on top of that, I think the offensive line has also played a huge role in this. If you go back and you watch that Kentucky and LSU game, Jackson was running around for his life. I mean, the guy had no time to throw. And the offensive line clearly has made some adjustments because against Georgia, I don't think they got many sacks, maybe one or two. But he was comfortable in the pocket. And that's when Jackson is the best, right? He's not a guy like, Nico from Tennessee or Jalen Milroe who's going to scramble every play and run really fast down the sideline. Jackson, he's best when he goes through his reads. And that happens when he's not getting pressured. And you could definitely see that being a challenge against a Florida team who went crazy in their front seven last week.
Yeah, Florida's definitely going to need to at least try and replicate that to keep this game competitive all throughout the four quarters. You mentioned Trey Harris a couple of times. Of course, I think we know how important he is to the offense. How much did the passing attack need or miss him, and who stepped up in his absence?
Yeah, so the first guy, I think is worth acknowledging is Jordan Watkins. I think he caught for 254 yards against Arkansas. It was a record-setting performance, and he's been incredible. He's been at Ole Miss. I believe this is his third year. He's really stepped up in that he was a slot player, but, Trey went out and he moved to the outside, and he's done a phenomenal job. Also, Juice Wells, who transferred from South Carolina, he's really filled in nicely without Harris. Caden Lee, he's a true sophomore. He's a slot player. He gets a lot of targets. And then our two tight ends, Caden Prieskorn and Daquan Wright. I know I'm throwing a lot of names at you, but it really has been receiving by committee. It's really the exact opposite of what we saw when Trey Harris was in the game because, like I told you guys, Trey was getting almost all the targets and all the receiving yards from this team. And Trey goes out, and the offense realized, hey, we got to figure out a way to move the ball without Trey Harris. And to make up for his yards, I mentioned it, they're using basically everybody who's available. And the question for Ole Miss fans is, if Trey returns in Gainesville this week, what type of approach do they take? Are they going to play this one-dimensional offense that only throws the ball to Trey Harris? Or are they going to continue to spread the ball around, hopefully getting everyone some receptions? Because I truly believe that's when the offense is at its best.
And you read my mind. That's what I was going to ask. Well, with him coming back, what will be the plan of attack? So it looks like something we'll have to wait and see on Saturday. Hey, look, if there is something we need to look for potential issues with this Ole Miss offense that maybe Florida can take advantage of, what would that look like?
Yeah, Dave, I'm going to kind of hit on what I said, but it's definitely this offensive line play. They've looked better. There's no doubt. They look great against Georgia. They did a really nice job against Arkansas. That was a huge win. But earlier in the season, Kentucky and LSU absolutely demolished us. And this is a Florida team that you have to play, in their home. And you guys are feeling the momentum, man. There's no question about it. I think the Texas game was obviously Lagway's not playing, but outside of that, Georgia, the team looked really good. And then you come back this week and you defeat LSU by 11 points with that defense. I think they totaled 95 tackles and 11 tackles for loss. So if you allow that defensive front to get active and to really, become threatening, it's going to be a problem for Jackson Dart. It's going to force him to make some uncomfortable throws, and it's probably going to blow up our running game as well, which is not as it has been in past years in Lane Kiffin's offense.
Zach Moreth of the Rebel Walk joining us right here on Gators Breakdown. We'll switch gears and, hey, look, not to be outdone by the offense, but Pete Golden's defense also leads the country in many categories, on pace to become one of the Rebels' best defenses in program history. It's just, and look, there's a kind of a Florida connection. Ron Roberts is kind of looked at as his mentor. So what, just overall, what have you seen from this? We'll get into specific because we all know Princely Umanmielen coming back to Gainesville. But big picture wise, what's made this defense so special? I mean, we know, like, we heard about it all leading up to the Georgia game. It was, we got to fix the line. We got to fix the pass rush. We saw it on display. Was it really that simple? Or was there more to it?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a lot of things, Dave. You not only did you go out and recruit guys like Walter Nolan and Princely from Florida, like you guys know, Pooh Paul from Arkansas, but they brought in a staff of really experienced, the defensive coordinators. Really, Brian Brown, who's coaching the secondary, was a defensive coordinator at Cincinnati. Zach Arnett, who's an analyst, was the head coach of Mississippi State. So there's a lot of things coming together here. I think, obviously the defensive line has just been disruptive. That's probably the best word that I can use. If you go back and watch that Georgia game, they were all over Carson Beck. And where they've really thrived the entire year is really just been shutting down the run game. There's essentially zero rushing attack for the opposing team. And that's going to be key against Florida. I also think it's going to be crucial to get pressure on DJ Lagway because we know he's had some going on with the hamstring. He had to leave the game against Georgia, and Florida only allows 1 sack against LSU. DJ looks protected the entire game, and that's when he's at his best, like most quarterbacks, right? So if Ole Miss is able to get pressure, make him move around, tally up those sacks like they usually do, I think they're going to be a game, probably the most important group to watch in this game.
Of course, I mentioned it, kind of previewed it. One of the bigger storylines, of course, in this new world of college football was transfer portal and Princely Umanmielen return. Look, it's senior day for the Gators, and if Princely was still at Florida, he'd be walking out with those guys, but instead he's going to be on the opposite sideline for this one. What has he meant to the Ole Miss defense?
Princely is a game changer, and I didn't really watch Florida football. I'm obviously not a Florida fan, but I didn't realize the potential that this guy had, and it looks like he's probably going to get drafted in the first round. One of the things that I always talk about is against LSU, Ole Miss didn't record a sack, and Princely wasn't playing in that game. And then he comes back against Georgia, and he comes back against Oklahoma and Arkansas, and you just see the immediate impact that he has. He makes quarterbacks really uncomfortable from the blind side, and he's, Carson Beck, I think he forced maybe 2 fumbles against Beck. The dude is an elite pass rusher. When I watch him go in on third down, it's usually a good sign that Ole Miss is going to get pressure. And he's allowed Ole Miss to really, reach the quarterback with 4 people rushing, which has been really, really impressive, especially against a team like Georgia. Because then you leave 7 guys in coverage, and you really can't get an open wide receiver. So Princely's impact it's been absolutely crucial for this team. And I'm kind of sad I didn't watch him at Florida because he's a really special player. Like I said, we're probably looking at a first-round talent here. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does and how he impacts this game on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. Emotional return for him, I'm sure, of course. Zach, you kind of alluded to it. This was something I kind of keyed into. Yeah, those guys up front with Princely, you don't have to bring extra pressure. You don't have to bring extra bodies to get to the quarterback. And look, LSU had to last week. Still wasn't really successful with a hampered DJ Lagway. That's the matchup for me is can LSU win with the 3 or 4 rushing up front? Because who on the back end, we know DJ Lagway looks high first and then low. He's looking for that 40, 50-yard throw first. So, if you guys are only rushing 3, 4, what does that secondary look like and trying to cover the deep ball against this Florida offense?
Yeah, we've had a couple defensive backs and safeties who've really stepped up. And the first name that comes to mind is Trey Amos, another projected NFL player. He's 6'1", got really good length.
Hey, a former Billy Napier guy.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. Transferred here from Alabama last year, and I think he's going to compete well against Elijah Badger. That's obviously an elite receiver. It's going to be a fun matchup. And then you look at the safety play, a couple guys, one by the name of John Saunders. He does a really nice job, not only in pass protection, but he forces a lot of fumbles, which is weird for a safety player to do so, but he's really good at it. Trey Washington's another safety, and these guys protect well with the deep pass. Now, there's no question that I think DJ Lagway has the potential to, catch these guys off guard, especially like you mentioned, Dave. This guy is always looking to make the deep ball pass. So I wouldn't put it out of question that Florida is at least going to try and hit some of those or even be successful on them. They might. But again, I think it starts with that defensive line and getting pressure to DJ to also prevent that from happening. John Saunders, one of the guys I mentioned, he said it in his press conference yesterday. He does his job and the defensive line does their job, and it usually works pretty well. So that's kind of going to be the key to success for Ole Miss. Again, DJ, the dude, he wants to hit the deep shot. Elijah Badger, elite wide receiver. Similar to Ole Miss, a lot of receivers have a lot of catches. So definitely not a wide receiving core you can sleep on. And DJ is an electric player that you definitely can't take for granted. So the secondary has to be unlocked, or else, he's going to convert on those big passes, and it's got to be something you have to prevent if you want to win this game.
Yeah, Florida's offensive line has started playing much better as of late, but that I think that goes hand in hand with Lagway being able to maneuver the pocket, and we saw that really shine against LSU last week. Zach, before we wrap up, I got to ask, how tiring was it hearing all the Lane Kiffin to Florida if the Florida job opened up? I know from your guys' perspective, I'm sure you got tired of hearing it, but I think we can finally put that to rest now, by the way. But
right.
How was it hearing it like week after week, for the last couple of months?
It's a frustration that I hope you never have to deal with, Dave, because it's every year. It started with Auburn, and then Nick Saban. I was working out at a local gym, and Nick Saban retires. So now everyone's texting me, "Oh, Lane's gonna leave. Lane's gonna leave." I'm like, I don't know. Like, we'll see. And then Florida, it's just been a roller coaster of emotions. It seems like he's pretty locked in here. He's proven he can win the big game here. His daughter is a sophomore like me. She goes to Ole Miss, and his son's also moving here, who's in high school. Mm-hmm. He's moving here next summer. So it seems like the pieces are aligning where we can finally put this rumor to bed. But yeah, man, it's frustrating and it's exhausting because Lane's a great coach and he's done great things at Ole Miss. And the last thing we want is for him to go to another SEC rival. So I'm glad that Napier is staying, for Ole Miss especially, but I think he's also doing some good things at Florida, especially as of recently. So, credit to both teams.
Yeah. So I guess, we'll wrap it up here. I guess now general feeling, of course, especially getting over that Georgia hump, it's, Lane Kiffin. Now, of course, can't fall on your face this week in Gainesville, and certainly got to beat Mississippi State in a couple of weeks. But it seems like, if the next 2 weeks go as planned, it's hard to be, disappointed with the trajectory of the program, especially for this year that was circled so much for needing to take that next step at Ole Miss.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This was the year, the number one transfer portal class. You get all these guys. You return Dart and Trey Harris and the tight end and all these different players. They went all in for this. Everyone's been calling it, the last dance, just like the Michael Jordan team. So losing to Kentucky, everyone's like, last dance. Like, what are we talking about? This is terrible. But you have completely 180'd that. You go out, you dominate Georgia, and your whole future's in front of you. We're going to find out tonight with the college football playoff ranks where we kind of sit. But I do believe that if Ole Miss wins out convincingly, I do think they will find themselves a spot in the playoffs. And if that happens, I think the goal is definitely achieved. And, the future is very bright here in Oxford.
All right. Hey, Zach, good job, man. Zach Moreth from the Rebel Walk. Go tell Evie, hey, I know she hooked us up right here. Really a good friend in the media world right there. Glad you guys are having success there at Ole Miss, and certainly glad that you guys can help me out right here on Gators Breakdown.
Absolutely, Dave. I appreciate you having me on, sir. And, hopefully it's a good game Saturday. Thank you so much.
See you, man. All right, good stuff there from Zach, and let's continue on this preview. Kind of a stat deep dive here of Ole Miss, and let's just take a look at some overall stats right quick. Guys, just look at this one. If you're on the YouTube version, you can see the statistical rankings here. Look at the right side for Ole Miss and the left side for Florida, but look at Ole Miss and just their values, especially a lot in the SEC where they're tops, first in the SEC in total offense, first in scoring offense, first in passing offense, first in passing efficiency, fifth in total defense, second in scoring defense, first in rushing defense, 13th in passing defense. There's a little weak link there for this defense. But first in sacks, first in tackles for loss. I mean, there's a lot of ones in the SEC for Ole Miss, and kind of goes along with the FBS too for a lot of stats. Second in total offense in the country, fourth in scoring offense, second in passing offense, second in the country in passing efficiency, fifth in the country in scoring defense, second in rushing defense. The highest for Florida in any of those team categories there is 9th in the SEC and 43rd in the country. And that's passing efficiency. Now, could you take away the Miami and Texas A&M games and Florida's playing much better? Absolutely. But just taking a whole season look here, that's the way it breaks down. For sacks, after a good week for Florida last week, of course, Florida is shot up there, tied for fifth in the SEC, 25th in the country with 27 sacks. So there's a quick look, but if you see the graphic, and I kind of just explained it the best I could there, a lot of tops in the SEC, a lot of near tops in the country for Ole Miss. Let's start on their offensive side. Senior quarterback, Jackson Dart. He ranks among the top signal callers in college football this season. You just saw some of those stats, but currently leading college football in 3 categories while leading the SEC in some as well, and residing within FBS top 10 in 5 other categories. So, I mean, leading the FBS in 3 categories while leading the SEC and residing within the FBS top 10 in 5 others. Dart leads the nation in total offense, 371.3 yards per game, passing efficiency 188.6, and yards per attempt at 11.4. And on the year, he owns a passing stat line 211 of 298, so about 71% completing his passes here, 3,409 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, about 300 yards rushing, and a more than capable runner when he needs to be. His 3,409 yards is tops in the SEC and number 3 in FBS, and his 22 passing touchdowns ranks first in the SEC and 9th in the country. He has 32 30-plus yard completions, leading the country in that as well. The only SEC quarterback to average more than 300-plus passing yards in SEC play is Jackson Dart. The only SEC quarterback to average more than 300-plus passing yards in SEC play. I had to repeat that one. That's ridiculous. The offense just in general is explosive. 3rd in the country in plays of at least 10 yards. 2nd in the country in plays of at least 20 yards. 1st in the country in plays that go at least 30 or 40 yards. 2nd in plays that go at least 50 yards. Tied for 1st in plays that go at least 60 yards. Explosive offense coming to town. Ole Miss is once again running a lightning quick offense, currently ranked 2nd in the SEC and 8th in the FBS in 23.4 seconds per play. So if they get it rolling, you know what's coming. Now, the amount of RPO lane can draw up. That really worries me, especially after what we saw against, the RPO, the play action game there. What we saw against Texas a couple weeks ago, don't need that to be replicated here. It's not an offense, that you want to play a ton of zone against, but Florida's probably going to have to. So you try mix it up too a bit. You're going to want to, but man, I just think you're going to have to limit what you can here. So many weapons for Ole Miss's offense. You just heard what we talked about there with all the stats and the interview with Zach, and of course, who they're getting back and what they've already proven. They're stacked up. Gators really need a repeat of last week, winning one-on-one matchups up front. And no duh, you got to do that every week. But Ole Miss can really make you pay more so than other teams if you're not pressuring Dart. So he can get the ball out, get the wide receivers the ball, and let them make plays. Get them in the early downs. Don't give Dart cheap yards with his legs. My biggest worry here is Dart keeping plays alive and then catch and run opportunities for Ole Miss's receivers. That's probably where I worry the most. You go back earlier in the season with Cam Ward and Marcel Reed. Florida hasn't really played another rushing quarterback that has the ability to throw the ball like those guys as well. So going to be interesting to see that matchup as well. Despite missing the last 3 games, senior wide receiver, preseason All-American Trey Harris, you heard us talk about him, he still ranks among the top pass catchers nationwide, even after missing 3 games. Harris remained as Pro Football Focus's top-rated wide receiver and ranks 5th in receiving yards at 987. Harris 804 yards through 5 games were the most by any receiver pre-October in the college football playoff era. Jordan Watkins, he's been a deep threat since arriving at Ole Miss, as evidenced, has 7 career receptions of at least 60 yards as a Rebel. That includes an FBS leading 4 catches of at least 60 yards this season, 3 of which came against Arkansas, and a record-setting day for him. And those 3 of at least 60 were for touchdowns. So that game, all 8 of Watkins' catches went for at least a first down, averaged a whopping 31.8 yards per reception against the Razorbacks. Per Pro Football Focus, Watkins has the second highest yards per route run when targeted of at least 20 yards down the field in FBS at 26.5 yards, hauling in 9 of his 16 targets beyond 20 yards for 424 yards in his 5 touchdowns. Trey Harris ranks 5th on that list, 23.73 yards per route run. So, guys, they will attack down the field. Ole Miss tight ends, Caden Priscorn, 18 catches, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. Daquan Wright, 19 receptions, 247 yards, and 3 touchdowns. They've been key in the Rebel offense as well, combining for 37 catches, 547 yards, 5 touchdowns. So don't overlook the tight end position. Look, when Trey Harris was the guy, you heard us talk about it, they did use their playmaker. They got him the ball. Since he's been out, of course, spreading the ball out a bit more. So it is going to be interesting to see how they adjust with him back in the lineup. Is Jackson Dart keying in on him a whole lot? Or does he continue to spread the ball out? Let's go to the other side of the ball. Rebels defense. It's insane here when you hear some of these stats. Saw some of them earlier, but let's get to it deeper. The Rebels lead FBS in 5 defensive categories. They lead in tackles for loss with 103. Tackle for loss yards with 447. Sacks with 46 on the season. Sack yards, 296. And yards per rush allowed, 2.23. While leading the SEC in rushing defense, a second in college football, as we saw earlier, with about 80 yards per game. And rushing touchdowns allowed, 5. That's 4th in FBS. The Rebels have notched at least 4 sacks in 7 of their 10 games this season, with an additional 5 games with at least 5 sacks, 3 with at least 6, and the most sacks in back-to-back games recorded in Ole Miss history after bruising Oklahoma for 9 sacks and then Arkansas for 8. So basically, what we saw Florida do versus LSU last week, Ole Miss has been doing that. Like I said, in back-to-back games, Oklahoma for 9, Arkansas for 8. 3 games with at least 6 sacks. I mean, it's insane what they've been able to do up front on defense. The Ole Miss defense currently leads FBS in tackles for loss with 103. In total forced yards lost at 447, averaging 10.3 tackles for loss per game and 44.7 yards lost per game. The Rebels have 6 games with double-digit tackle for loss this season, the most in available game-by-game data since 1997. One more time. They have 6 games with double-digit tackles for loss this season. They can't find that going back to 1997. So it's ridiculous. The Ole Miss defensive line entered 2024 with a considerable amount of hype and, of course, Pro Football Focus grades. The Rebels have lived up to that hype. Among both edge and interior linemen, Ole Miss owns 3 of the top 15 overall in the ratings. In defensive end, Princely Umanmielen, he's 3rd. Defensive end, Jared Ivey, he's 8th. And defensive tackle, Walter Nolan, 15th. 3 in the top 15 on Pro Football Focus. There was a lot of hype coming in. They lived up to it. In run defense, Ole Miss owns 2 of the top 10 interior linemen, with Bednarik Award semifinalist Nolan leading the college football at 91.2 grade. Defensive tackle, J.J. Pegues, he's 9th, 86.7. Combined, Ole Miss 5 main starters on the defensive line. Ivy, Nolan, Pegues, Suntarine Perkins, and Umanmielen have tallied up 167 tackles, 54 tackles for loss, 33 sacks, and 25 quarterback hurries. So pretty fearsome defensive front there in Oxford. Ole Miss defensive ends Jared Ivey, Suntarine Perkins, Princely Umanmielen have also formed one of the most powerful edge rush contingents in all of college football, all three ranked within the top 25 nationally in sacks, with Perkins leading at 6 nationally and second in the SEC with 10 sacks. That's already tied for the second most in Ole Miss single season history. Umanmielen, of course, transferred from Florida. He isn't far off, tied for 7th nationally, 3rd in the SEC with 9.5 sacks. 6 have come in the last 3 games for Princely. And Ivy, he meanwhile is tied for 5th in the SEC, 22nd nationally at 7. So while the front gets a lot of attention, and rightfully so, cannot overlook linebacker Chris Paul Jr., Chris Pooh, is what they call him, like Pooh Bear, has consistently ranked among the top-rated defenders in all of college football in 2024. He's currently rated as Pro Football Focus's number 2 overall defender and number 1 linebacker with a season grade of 90.9. He is the lone linebacker in the SEC to have a grade in the 90s by Pro Football Focus, and he also ranks as the number 5 coverage defender in FBS with a 90.4 grade. So have a linebacker who can cover really well. That's why this defense is so good. He leads Ole Miss with 74 total tackles and ranks 3rd on the team with 10 tackles for loss, alongside 2.5 sacks, 9 quarterback hurries, 4 pass breakups, and 1 fumble recovery. Paul Jr. is currently a semifinalist for both the Bednarik Award and the Butkus Award. Man, that's a challenge for this improving Florida offensive line. I'm going to shout it out one more time. You guys know I was pretty critical of the group coming in and got criticized myself for criticizing the offensive line. And they started off bad. Started off bad with, basically living up to what I was hearing leading up to the season. But that group, like I said, I always try to be fair. And that group has improved. They're so much improved. Are they a great offensive line? No. But they're not a bad offensive line right now either. DJ Lagway being at quarterback really, really does help. But they've been able to open up some more run holes lately as well. They have improved. They are a better offensive line than what was coming out of fall camp and what we saw earlier this season. Can they give enough time for DJ Lagway to hit the deep shots? That's, that's just where we're at here. We know how much Lagway relies on the explosive plays, how much this offense relies on on the explosive plays. Can he have the time to get it off? Ole Miss can match it well in the secondary, and I imagine we'll play coverage deep on the back end, have their linebackers dropping in the throwing lanes as well, because they're pretty confident their defensive front can get the pressure needed. I can see them sitting in zone, making Lagway make the right decisions and make those decisions quickly. That's what this Ole Miss defensive line can do to you. You're going to have to make fast, quick, and the right decision. Lagway has proven he can do that. But can he do it over and over and over again if under duress and there's defenders in coverage? They can let up some big plays, Ole Miss. We'll get into that in just a second. They can. Their passing defense, that's their weak link. And it's odd that that's their weak link given how they can pressure the quarterback. But how many chances will Florida get to convert them? We just saw what they did to Georgia. Georgia couldn't do anything. Carson Beck did not have time to do anything versus this Ole Miss defensive front. Need Lagway to be able to run a bit more than he was against LSU, in my opinion. Ole Miss is likely going to get in the backfield, so I do wonder how much Lagway can get away. And if he stays in the pocket, how mobile is he to, so I think, can he slow down the rush from the Rebels? If they're consistently getting pressure, but Lagway's able to burn them by picking up yards with his legs, then it can slow down that rush. And they may have to start bringing more bodies to get to him. Maybe putting a spy on him. And then the big play really can happen more. So really need to jump in where that hamstring is. And as we all know, another way to slow it down is Florida can run right at him. But this is a defense that's only giving up 2.2 yards a rush. So this may turn in even more into the DJ Lagway show. If he can run, put some pressure on that Ole Miss defense in that fashion, it's only going to help. So let's take a look at the 2 losses from Ole Miss this season to Kentucky and LSU. Is there anything we can pick apart in those games that we can probably see again? Or not probably, but maybe we see again. If Florida's going to win this game, if Florida wins this game, can we see anything in those other losses? Of course, Kentucky, LSU, two teams Florida has beaten. The game against Kentucky for Ole Miss was just weird. Kentucky and Brock Vandagriff threw for 243 yards against Ole Miss. That is by far Vandagriff's best SEC game. His next highest is 192 against Tennessee. So 243 against Ole Miss's defense, 192 against Tennessee. That's how big the gap is from his best game against Ole Miss and his next best game against Tennessee. Ole Miss gives up an average of 229 yards through the air. That's good for 82nd in the country. It's pretty much their only bad stat as a team. In that game, it was also Jackson Dart's lowest output of the season, at least throwing the ball. That's 261 yards. It was 18 and 27, 261 yards, and only one touchdown. Kentucky did a good job making him uncomfortable in that game. He missed some throws in that one too. But that stat line, 18 and 27, 261, and one touchdown, that does not spell a doom for Ole Miss, though. That was the stats in a loss, but it's pretty much the exact same stat line he had against Georgia, where he went 18 to 28, 263 yards, and one touchdown. So he had one more attempt and two more yards versus Georgia than compared to Kentucky, and massively different results. So yeah, you'd probably like to duplicate that stat line pretty close to that. But what does the Ole Miss defense do? That's the difference. The overtime loss to LSU could be defined by the Ole Miss defense and the offense. It can be defined by the Ole Miss defense and their struggles, and then their offense having to settle for field goals. They had to settle for 3 field goals in that game. In that 29-26 overtime loss, Garrett Nussmeier threw for the second highest yards Ole Miss has given up this season with 337. And here's the kicker. You heard all those sack numbers I brought up for Ole Miss a bit ago. The Rebels defense did not sack Nussmeier once. That all LSU offensive line is good, but we just saw Florida get 7 sacks last week against that LSU offensive line. Ole Miss didn't get one. That is the only SEC game where Ole Miss didn't have at least 5 sacks. So there's your story in both the losses for Ole Miss. Can Florida replicate any of that? Unfortunately, I don't see a third happening. 34-23 Ole Miss is my prediction. Simple formula for me in this game. Hit explosives, stop explosives. I think Ole Miss is going to have too many. They'll have more than Florida. Now, look, I thought LSU would have a bit better day hitting explosives last week, so I hope the trend of me being wrong in that category continues. Like I said, I expect Florida to kind of sit in that zone most of the day, try to limit those explosives. That bend, don't break style of defense. Going to have to come up and tackle. Make your tackles. Maybe not sit so far back in third down to try and limit some third down conversions, but I expect another bend, don't break style, given depth on Florida's back end still. Still lacking their really good test for this Florida secondary once again against these wonderful Ole Miss receivers. 34-23 Ole Miss. Man, I know there's so much positive mojo after the win over LSU last week. I just think Ole Miss is pretty good. I think they're pretty good. They are beatable. They certainly are, but we've seen it in the SEC this year. Going on the road is difficult. Florida's playing better. We've seen 2 games this year from Ole Miss where, coulda, shoulda, woulda beat Kentucky, coulda, shoulda, woulda beat LSU, but they didn't. I'll take another coulda, shoulda, woulda beat Florida, but didn't. So hopefully it continues right there. But unfortunately, I don't see this one going that way. But hey, I was wrong last week. I'll be wrong. I'd love to be wrong again this week. Had a pretty good beat on what Florida was trying to do midseason when picking them against UCF, picking them against Kentucky, when many others weren't at the time. I missed the one last week. So I'll trade it again. I'll trade it again. All right, let's keep it going right here on this episode of Gators Breakdown. Focus on the Gators with Alex Shepard. And Alex, man, finally get off that losing streak to LSU. And you were in the swamp. I was in the swamp. A coworker of mine, her and I were discussing. She was like, she didn't go to the game, but she was watching it on TV. She goes, you could feel it through the TV. She goes, it felt from far away, it felt like a vintage swamp.
Yeah, that was the most energy that's been in there since the first minute of the Miami game. That trailed off real quick, but yeah, it was good to see some of that energy back in the swamp, and fans that clearly wanted to pull off a big win. I think everyone was just kind of tired of losing to LSU, honestly.
Yeah.
So it was good to get that off of our backs and get back in the win column.
Yep, there we go. I'm trying to get the photos up that you gracefully took, and man, I mean, boom, there we go, setting the stage right there. Alex, to me, man, it felt like an exhale moment for, I think, the fan base in some ways too, but certainly I think for all the talk of Billy Napier and hot seat and not hot seat, vote of confidence, and whether you agree with it, disagree with it, whatever it is. I mean, it felt like a exhale, sigh of relief.
Yeah, and I posted something about that on Twitter as well, that it just felt like a weight was lifted, even if temporarily. It felt like since Utah 3 years ago, Billy Napier just could not find a way to get that big win against a rival, and it I don't know, it just had kind of been the monkey on his back that he could not seem to get off. And finally, this team, who a lot of people could argue that LSU is maybe more hated than some of our other rivals, because recently they just keep beating us. And I mean, FSU this year, I hope we can handle. But yeah, it was a good day to just kind of say, okay, finally, this is what it feels like to be in the win column, and to do it in a exciting fashion. It almost felt like shades of when we beat Auburn and the P. Ryan run. It was very electric in there. It was very emotional. A lot of people, I mean, they had a lot of security. I don't know if you noticed that. So clearly they heard about what Spurrier was talking about, because I have never seen that much security. And not only that, the security was on the student side. Like they had a couple people, like the normal contingent on the alumni side, but the student side, it was shoulder to shoulder security, and they were ready for them to storm the field. And I'm glad we didn't, because that's not the standard that we should be setting, is beating the number 22 team. That should be an every year kind of deal.
Yeah. Were you surprised to hear Spurrier go that way? I mean, it's just like, you think he knows. I mean, look, I think he kind of just wanted to maybe bask in the glory of some excitement that may happen. But now maybe if the game had ended in like a Hail Mary, last second field goal or something, maybe you could still see it happen, since it was kind of out there already. Billy Napier said the team talked about it on Saturday as well. But I am a bit surprised that Spurrier, what did he call it? Swarm the swamp or something?
I don't know. I mean, I think that it may call me old fashioned, but I feel like you reserve that for like a top three kind of upset or a big game. And this one, LSU's a rival, sure, but the number 22 team in the country does not deserve having the field stormed, especially when you're only winning your 5th game of the season. Yeah.
Little did I know till I saw the picture you sent. Little Greg Sankey was in the building.
Greg was there. Yeah, he was hanging out mostly with the LSU contingent that was there. He was talking and hanging out in their tunnel for most of the warm-ups. So, it was cool seeing him in the swamp again. I think this is he's been here multiple times, and that's the 3rd time I think I've seen him in person.
Yeah, Jack Pyburn fired up before the game right there. Good photo of him. Always bringing the energy there. You and I were talking after the game, of course, and we've been there for the bad of the bad this year, whether it be the performance on the field and the fan base letting Billy Napier have it. And look, complete 180 from post game of the Texas A&M game, which is the last home loss, by the way. Florida wins over UCF and Kentucky in between the win now with LSU. But man, certainly a different reaction from the crowd of Billy Napier heading into the tunnel this time.
Yeah, I had posted on Twitter as well that that video I had taken at halftime when Billy was running into the tunnel against Texas A&M, and how many people? I mean, I would say 80% of the crowd seemed like they were booing him from my perspective. And then after that game as well, I mean, you were down there and you could hear it. There was a lot of boo birds out there, and understandably so. I mean, we were not seeing the product that we're used to seeing on the field. And it's funny how things can change. I think that if we somehow pull out a win next week, you're going to see a lot of excitement and people like, okay, you know what? Maybe we were too quick to jump the gun on Billy, but I'm still in the mindset that 6-win seasons at UF is not a standard to set.
Yeah.
I get that beating LSU is a big deal. It's it's how it should be. We should be setting that as a standard to not just beat them once in 3 years, but beat them every year. And I think that given the vote of confidence from Strickland and the idea that we're going to put in money into NIL, if Billy really is going to be the coach next year, that's when, I mean, it's make or break. There's no question that has to be the year that he shows up, shows out, and the fans will boo him day one if he ends up losing at home for first game, anything like if he loses to Miami, whatever it may be.
Guys, if you're watching the YouTube version, that picture right there, that one hits hard. That one. Caleb Banks, of course, the game he had, ball in his hand, of course, laying out Emory Jones, the LSU offensive lineman, picking up a fumble, got the Gator country in the background. That one. I like that, man. That defensive performance too. That was something to see in the second half of that game.
Yeah, and that was a great way to bounce back from last week. I mean, obviously, the offense last week looked very different, but the defense outside of that Texas game has just been playing lights out. They've been looking really good. I think the fans also brought an element to that affected Nussmeier and the LSU offense, but our defense, just the defensive line has looked dominant, and that has not been the case in many years. It just hasn't felt like we've been those really aggressive, dominant guys that we are used to seeing. And so, yeah, really proud of how they're playing. I think the DBs did well aside from one or two plays. Linebackers, Gums, there you go. Yeah. Gums had a really great game. And let me tell you, when I'm talking about a unit, this man is shredded. And he's a lot bigger when you're standing next to him. I mean, I'm sure from the stands that he looks like a big guy, but you stand next to him and he is a tank. Yeah, that photo is one of my favorites I think I've taken all season.
Yeah, good to see him getting. I mean, look, and he was one of those players where, I mean, he's coming from NIU. What are we really getting here? What are we doing here? Florida needs edge help, and you got a bunch of young guys. You got Pyburn coming off of injury. Gums, I think, has probably surpassed the expectations. And now, don't get me wrong, and not many people were putting high expectations on him, but he's an SEC player.
Yeah, clearly, and he's starting. I remember seeing him early in the season, like maybe first game, second game, and I'm seeing him on the field. I'm like, man, I really haven't heard that much about this guy. Like, I didn't hear a lot of stuff in the offseason. I didn't really have, like you said, I didn't have high expectations for him, but he's absolutely outperformed what I thought that he would bring to the team. And I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to see a guy who's passionate about the team and passionate about being, in the backfield. And it's a welcome sight for all of Gator Nation, I'm sure.
Alex, I do have to ask you this question because I know how it is from a videographer side of things. How different from a photographer now? You could give me the fan aspect too, because we're both fans, of course, too. How different is it trying to capture DJ Lagway on the field when you have no idea if that ball is about to fly 50 yards in the air, or against LSU, that's probably pretty much what it was, 30, 40, 50 yards, because he couldn't run a whole lot. But, just given that angle of it, I mean, you have to be ready at any moment to capture what DJ Lagway is about to do.
Yeah, a lot of the times you don't know where that thing's going. You don't know if he's going to tuck it and run. And I had a little inkling, given the injury and all that, that they were not going to put him in a situation where he had to run. But he's still very elusive regardless. And so I kind of have to play safety a little bit. I'm watching the quarterback with my eyes while I have the camera up, and I was actually sitting next to a good photographer friend of mine, Matt Pendleton, on the deep touchdown to Badger. And I was looking at Lagway, and he looked it off and did the pump. And as soon as I saw that, I glanced over and saw Badger coming, and I told Pendleton as soon as I saw that, right here, because we were in that corner, right here, it's gonna be right here. And sure enough, just that perfect money shot over to the corner of the end zone. And so, yeah, I've definitely learned a lot about football in the sense of watching the quarterback's eyes. Like it's not just hyperbole like that. They mean that when they're talking to safeties and linebackers and all these people, because you really have to keep your eye on him, or else you could blink and he could be on the other side of the field running it himself. So it was exciting to see. It's obviously a lot more exciting to photograph us when we're in the end zone. And like, cause normally I put myself in the end zone that we're driving towards so that I can get the touchdowns, get the big plays. When we are running an offense that can't make it past the 50, I end up with like no images, and it's not very exciting. No celebration shots, nothing like that. So yeah, it's exciting to have him on the field. And now I will say this, and then we can move to the next thing. You know, obviously he brings a different level of play to the offense. I want to note though, it's not all his fault, but the accuracy is still not where it needs to be.
Yeah.
He's still, I think he had it was like 50% during the game.
Mm-hmm.
He brings that next level. Like when he hits it and it's a great throw. And you can see the talent is there, but I would like to see a little more consistency going forward on, you know, getting those passes out, putting them on target. And if you start seeing him hit 60, 65% of his passes, I mean, you're going to be talking about an elite offense. It's just, he's got to get that little bit more, and we'll be up there.
Yeah. You know, just kind of looking at it still, you know, that was his, fourth start of the season. Was splitting times with Mertz before he got hurt. So absolutely, we get hopefully a full game this week and next week as well, and then go into the offseason, being able to build on everything that he's learned this year. And as you said, kind of take that next step there. I don't know why that picture went away. Looks like my hard drive disconnected. There we go. Anyway, yeah. So hopefully build upon that. Alex, a theme this week, and let's call it M&M. Momentum and maturity are two key terms that are used a lot this week. For Florida, what does that look like for you?
Well, I definitely think you've seen a team that has matured through the season. That's clearly showing on defense, and then they've kind of been forced to do that on offense because they're having to surround. Like Mertz was a senior figure in the offense. He had played many games. He had started a bunch of games, but now, given that you have a young guy who has had to take his place, everyone around him, all those other guys, DK, Badger, offensive linemen, have had to kind of form a circle around him and say, okay, we're going to be the mature group, and we're going to show you how it's done. And I will tell you what, all the photographers talk about this. Lagway's actually a really mature guy for his age. He does not celebrate really hard. He doesn't gloat. He's very much about the game, and he keeps it, I would say, 50% on the celebration. Like I got a smile out of him. One of the pictures in here was him smiling after a touchdown, and that's like the most I've seen. And so, yeah, I think they've matured. I think that they are. There it is. And I don't know. The momentum seems to have eluded this team a lot. Like we get a big win and then we find ourselves losing the next week in outstanding fashion. I think that remains to be seen if we're going to continue that. I hope that we get in and we play a competitive game against Ole Miss and we keep that momentum going. I think that the crowd is going to play a big factor. I think that you're likely going to see a lot of energy that will even surpass the LSU game. Because not only could it get us bowl eligibility, but you have Lane Kiffin, who a lot of fans are, giving the eye to about, wanting to coach this team. But it's kind of weird. You have like the people who want him to be our coach, but now you also have people like, oh man, I want to see Billy beat up on like, you have these two like fan base contingents that are going at each other. And it's just a weird dynamic, but
hey, some people may be the same fan who's changed their tune in the last few weeks.
Trust me. I mean, there's some people I saw on Twitter that were the ones calling for him to be fired that are now saying they want him to beat him. And, I think that you can have your opinions. You can feel what you want to feel. I early on in the season, I said that, this is not the team that the Gator fans expect. They're still not there, but they're starting to show those flickers of hope that I think a lot of people were wanting to see now that Lagway is the starter. And that's going to give them something to build on in the offseason, which I'm really excited to see. Like, I feel like every offseason we've gone and been like, who's going to be the starter? It's going to be a quarterback battle. We don't know. And now we're going to, hopefully have a competitive game against Ole Miss. We'll see if we can pull it out. I don't know if it's possible because that offense is nothing like the LSU offense.
Yeah.
The defense is going to be up for more of a test, kind of like the Texas game in terms of offensive prowess than LSU. But hopefully we can make it competitive and somehow pull off an upset. But if not, I will happily take a curb stomping of FSU in Tallahassee for bowl eligibility. That would be a welcome sight as well.
Yeah. Last thing here, of course, it's the last home game of the year. It goes by so fast. Ole Miss coming to town, like you said, chance to make a statement, but kind of go to the same point. Yes, I want to win, and that is the goal. But momentum, maturity, to me, that looks like playing well versus Ole Miss, and then the very next week, as you said, going and pounding Florida State to end the season, go get bowl eligible, and build some even more momentum off of that.
Yeah, we bowl win has escaped Billy as well, and the one chance he had to go there.
Yeah,
and
bowl
so
games have escaped.
and so yeah, I'm 100% with you there. That if we really want to build true momentum, even if we lose on Saturday, if I hate saying, oh, if it's competitive and they play hard, I don't agree with that whole mentality. But
we know what the team is.
But we know what we're getting when they go in the field. And if they can get out there, and I'm just saying, if we lose and it's a close game, and then we go to Florida State next week and put up 35-3 win or something, that gives you just that, like, again, it keeps that little flicker of hope. Okay, you know what? Maybe if we funnel those dollars into NIL, we really do give Billy the ability to get these high dollar 5-star players in here. Maybe he gets an OC in the offseason, and maybe next season it looks different. It gives us that little glimmer of hope. So I'm with you. I think that in order to keep the momentum alive, we cannot have it like a Texas-like game where we get absolutely destroyed in the swamp. I don't think that that'll be the case. I think we're going to have a decent showing, but it's going to take a lot for them to pull off the win and hopefully keep the momentum going into Tallahassee.
Yeah, look, and kind of going to your point about the Ole Miss game and kind of keep look. We're kind of tired of saying, keeping it close, playing hard, and there not being a payoff. That's that a lot of that talk came with losses to Tennessee and losses to Georgia. Oh, we played hard, but we just came up short. At least versus LSU, the narrative changed a bit. You played hard, you played well, and you won. Yeah, and you got the payoff of a win this time instead of, oh, we see the direction, but nothing to show for it. You actually had something to show for it this time.
Yeah, talk can only get you so far. These words of, these guys, they care about each other and they play hard. It's like, okay, well, I'm glad you want that in your team. You want them to play hard. You want them to care, but that should be for any team. Right. No matter who you are. Like, if you have guys that aren't playing hard and don't care about each other, then obviously we have a problem here. But now we this week was great. We still have a problem that needs fixing. We need to make sure we're getting guys in that can help us win games, but we also need to the offense looked good. It still wasn't what it needs to be in order to be hyper successful here at Gainesville, like some of our past guys who are, the offensive gurus have been. So a lot of work to be done. I think Ole Miss is going to tell us a lot about the team going into the off season here soon. But I have faith that we're going to put a decent showing on the field. Will it be a win? We'll see.
Alex, like I said, great photos, having to show them off there. I guess I don't want to throw you under the bus here, but like holiday season photo season time for you, maybe? do you do any of that for the people out there?
For the right price. Okay. No, I tend to stay away from the holiday photos.
Okay.
I find myself, it's not really a busy time in real estate during the holidays. A lot of people are spending time away with family.
Okay.
Don't have time to look for homes. And so I tend to do the same where I just spend time with family. I take the pictures for the last week of the season. And then, if we get a bowl game that's in a reasonable distance away, I'll likely try and go shoot that. But if you're looking for holiday photos, head over to JCPenney. They got you.
Oh, that's good. Oh, so as you said, I guess wrapping up with the with the year, but still, if anybody, I guess there is some movement around the holiday season because people are off of work for the holidays, and I guess people could be making that move, and they might have some free time themselves to be looking around. So if you're in the Jacksonville area, how can I get in touch with you?
Yeah, for most people on here, if you go to X/Twitter, you can go there and you can DM me on there to talk about the market, or if you're looking to move to anywhere in Northeast Florida, Yulee, Jacksonville, St. Johns County, St. Augustine, I work all in that area. If you don't have access to Twitter, you can go to email me. My email is alex.shepherd, spelled like it is on the screen, at FloridaNetworkRealty.com. Happy to answer any of your questions, and look forward to bringing you over to Jacksonville in the 904.
Absolutely. So there we go. Alex, man, thank you much. We'll do it again and preview Florida State next week, hopefully after another win right here against the Ole Miss Rebels. But here we are, one more time, focused on the Gators with Alex Shepherd. Always a fun time with Alex and seeing, man, his wonderful shots that he gets for us right there in the swamp. Does a great job. Enjoy having those conversations with him. Everybody, that'll do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. I am your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining me on this episode of Gators Breakdown.